Hello, this is the second video for the third week. Of course, this is Sunday. I'm recording this video, so it's too late, but I will set up the time for watching the video for the attendance as long as we can. So don't worry about attendance rate by watching the whole video. So you can just watch this video for any time, maybe until the third week of April or something. So yeah, you can just study by yourself, but sometimes you don't understand something, then you can just watch this video. It may help you a little bit on that time. Okay, we'll start the new chapter, but which will be just application of your basic supply and demand model. We are still talking about some basic stuff for microeconomics, which you already studied from the principles of macroeconomic course. So I think it is easy for almost everyone. But in this chapter, we're gonna get to know a little bit more about the supply and demand curve in detail with some more mathematical approach. So I'm repeating talking about the mathematics difficulties. I know some of you guys have some difficulties in understanding these microeconomic stuffs in terms of mathematics. But if you have that type of difficulty, um, the solution I would like to suggest is that you can just personally try to understand everything without mathematics. You can just understand some basic concept by your own words or by your own sentence. For instance, since you are Korean, you can just understand something like demand, low of demand or low of supply in words of Korean. After that, after fully understanding the basic concept by your own, then you can just apply that type of things to the mathematical expression and doing some examples or practice problems that I would upload for each chapter as practice problems. So you can just practice with that problem with a little bit of more mathematics. Okay. Even if you don't understand the mathematics, even after doing that try, then you can just stop understanding in mathematics. I think that's enough to understand the world of microeconomics, because you don't have to do math to do economics, basically. But by doing some math, then you're gonna have a little bit easier path to understand some deeper understanding of microeconomics. So that's the beauty of math in doing some social science. But I don't think it is necessary steps for everyone. But anyway, in this course, I will use a little bit more mathematic terms, so you can try to understand that. But even if you don't understand that, then you can just understand in words of Korean or the other language rather than mathematics. Okay, so in this chapter, it's just all about the elasticity, in Korean 탄력성. So the elasticity is a kind of sensitivity of supply and demand curve to the change of exogenous changes like price changes or the income changes or any other factor changes. So your demand, your quantity demanded or your quantity supplied will be changed if there is any kinds of changes in your environment, like the price of that good changes or price of your supplement good changes or your income changes or maybe technology changes. So you're gonna have some changes or you're gonna have some adjustment to the change of your environment. But the important is the degree of your change of quantity demanded. How you are sensitive to the changes of prices of that good or prices of the other good or the other changes of environment. Okay, so this chapter is talking about your sensitivity of changes in your demand or supply. Okay, because it has a lot of meaning and it has a lot of beauty or merit to understand many parts of our world. So the sensitivity of supply and demand curve is expressed by the shape of those curves. So simply saying, the elasticity of supply and demand curve will be interpreted exactly in the shapes of supply and demand curves. So it is easy because we can use some graphics rather than mathematics. Then you can still understand the same thing. So we'll just study about that in graphics and study about it in some economic terms. So by understanding the economic meaning of elasticity of supply and demand curves, then we can apply it for the detail in our real world. So maybe we can have one or two examples in this chapter. So I'm going to pick up the tax because tax is really important part in our real world. So, and we can interpret the effect of tax or your decision making on tax by using the concept of elasticity of supply and demand curves. Okay, so the shapes of the curves matters a lot, basically. So, if there is any change in price of the good you are consuming or you are supplying, then your sensitivity of quantity demanded or quantity supplied will be changed if the price level of that good is changed, because price is really important information in the market, and if the market information is updated, then your activity or your decision making will be also changes. That's real reasonable things. So here is one example. We are still talking about the avocado market. I'm still loving avocado rather than tomato or carrot or something. I hate carrot, but I love avocado. So our assumption is that avocado and the fertilizers are the complement each other, which means that they help each other. If the price level of fertilizer is decreasing, then the demand for fertilizer is increased by the low demand, right? And also, since the avocado and the fertilizers are the complement each other, the demand for avocado will be also increased because we can get fertilizer with less money, and with the fertilizer we can get the more avocado, so the demand for avocado will be also increased by our logical decision making. So here you go. In this example, the price of fertilizer is increased. So S1 is the original supply curves for avocado, but S2 is the decreased supply curves of avocado because the fertilizer's price level is increased. So there is the increase in the cost of supplying avocado, right? So the supply curve will be decreased from S1 to S2. And the demand curve is the same, never changes. So our equilibrium quantity will be decreased from E1 to E2 by 8. Okay, so the unit of 8 is really important information in this case because we're going to compare this number with the other two examples. Let's look at the center graphic. Okay, it's the same decrease of supply curves because it looks like the same supply curves, right? So the slope of supply curves are the same between the left graph and the center graph. So the same increase of the price of fertilizer, so the same decrease of supply of the avocado. But in this case, now the demand curve shape is different. It is vertical, very extreme case, but it is vertical and the supply curve decreases the same. So there is no change in the quantity of equilibrium, right? So E1 and E2 are the same quantity. Only the price level is increased from $2 to 2.73. Okay, it is huge compared to the left side. How about the third graph on the right side? The same supply decreased because the increased price level of fertilizer is the same, 55 cents. But in this case, the demand curve, the D3, is now horizontal. It is another extreme case. So the equilibrium quantity is decreased from E1 to E2 by 11 units. It's the most, right? So, and there is no change in the price level. Okay, so now we can compare all of these three. So I think the left-hand side is the most normal case because the demand curve is decreasing and the supply curve is increasing. We can see this type of market in most of commodities. So since supply is decreased, the equilibrium quantity is decreased and equilibrium price level will be increased. That's the normal thing, right? But in second and the third graph, it is really different. In the center graph, there is no decrease in quantity equilibrium, but there is a huge increase in the equilibrium price level, right? On the right side, there is huge decrease in the quantity equilibrium, but there is no change in the equilibrium price level, right? So now we can see why they are different like this. The same equilibrium changes, same supply curve decreased, but the equilibrium prices are hugely different. And equilibrium quantities are also very different because their sensitivities are different. And this type of sensitivity to the change of prices of their complement are called elasticity. Okay, so now we can define the elasticity. There are very many types of elasticity in the market, but we can start with the basic elasticity. The elasticity is the percentage change in one variable in response to a given percentage changes in another variable. Simple, right? So now we can define the basic elasticity, which is called the price elasticity of demand. Now we can call with the epsilon, the green number. So the price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in the quantity demanded in response to a given percentage changes in the price at a particular point on the demand curve. So every word in this definition is very important. So I think it is good for you if you remember everything. Economics is not the memorizing game. You don't have to memorize many things while studying economics, but sometimes memorizing some definitions will be help you in studying a at the higher level or even taking exam. And price elasticity of demand definition is really important. And if you understand this sentence, then you are really good right now. You are really great student right now. Okay, so let's look at carefully. The percent change, the first term, is really important. It is not the whole change, it's the percent change. We can define in mathematics in the later chapter, the later page. Percent change in the quantity demanded, right? In response to. So the price elasticity of demand is basically the percent change of the quantity demanded, but in response to a given percent change in the price level. Okay, so the percent change of quantity demanded to the percent change of the price. So this is the ratio of ratio, right? At the particular point on the demand curve. So which means that this price elasticity of demand is not a single unit across all demand curve. It could be changed varying on the different point of demand curves. That's another important information. So let's look at the formal definition of price elasticity of demand. Okay, so price elasticity of demand will be defined by, let's look at the numerator part, percent change. So this triangle means a change of, okay, the percent change of quantity demanded over percent change of price, right? So we can loosely express the percent terms like quantity change of quantity demand over quantity demand, right? That is the definition of percent change of quantity demand. How about the percent change of price, which will be defined by change of price over price. So the equation 1 is the formal definition of price elasticity of demand, right? So example, if 1% increase in the price result in a 3% changes in decrease in the quantity demanded, the price elasticity of demand is negative 3% over plus 1%, which equal to negative 3. Okay, the unit is nothing. There is no percentage. There is no single unit of something. So there is no unit, just negative 3. Okay. So this is another further practice. So now we assume that the demand curve is linear. Linear means there is no polynomial terms. Okay. So quantity demanded is defined by a constant number A negative the parameter B times the price of that good. The equation 2 is really simple version of demand curve. So the most important parameter is maybe negative B, because negative B is the slope of this curve, right? And we look up before like this. The slope of demand curve really matter in determining the sensitivity of that demand, right? So the negative B is really important information in understanding the price elasticity of demand. And this B is the slope, which means that it is change of quantity demanded over change of the price level, right? Understand that? Because it is slope. And if you think about the meaning of the slope of the linear curves, and that slope means that if something changes and the other things changes, like this. So the elasticity of demand is simply expressed by negative B times P over quantity demanded by using equation 3 and equation 1. The first term of equation 1 could be replaced by negative B. So negative B is here in the first part of equation 4, and the remaining part is the same. So equation 4 is the simpler version of expression of the price elasticity of demand. If you don't understand my speaking or explanation, then you can definitely borrow a textbook. Any textbook of microeconomics is possible. So here is practice problems. The same linear curves, right? And so what is the slope of this curve? Negative 0.5, right? So you can express the price elasticity of demand really easy, right? So the question is that if the price is $7.2, then what is the elasticity of demand? You can put this price level 7.2 into the equation 5, then you can get the quantity demanded, right? Then you can get quantity demanded and you can get the price level at the specific point of demand curve. Then you can put those two numbers in the equation 4, and you know negative B, right? You know negative B is negative 0.5, and you can put that number too. Then you can get everything, like equation 6, right? So you can get the answer, the negative 0.3, but the more important is interpretation, because economics is not mathematics. Economics is the social science. So you already have to interpret your result of calculation by words. That's the most important part in studying micro and macroeconomics. Okay, so price elasticity of demand is negative 0.3, means that 1% of change in the price will result in a 0.3% decrease in the quantity demanded. Okay, so this good is a kind of normal good, because the price increased, demand decreased. That is normal good character, right? But the sensitivity is relatively low because it is smaller than 1. We'll study about that. So even there is 1% of changes in the price level, the only sensitivity of this demand curve is 0.3%. So they are moving, but they are moving slowly, or they are moving just a little. So we can say that this demand is a little bit inelastic, which means that it is sensitive but less sensitive to the other goods. Okay. Many students are confused with the elasticity because they think elasticity is the same across all the points of demand curves. But this is wrong concept. The elasticity of demand will be changed along the curves because as we studied before here in our first practice problem, specific point of price level and specific point of quantity demanded will determine the price elasticity of demand at that point. So we can easily assume that if the price level at certain point and quantity demanded at that point are changed, then price elasticity of demand will be also changed. So you can just practice by yourself. So we have 5 example point. Then you can calculate by yourself the price elasticity of demand at each point. Then you can discover that that result will be different between all of them. And there will be some elasticity value which is a larger than 1 or larger than -1. We can call that type of elasticity is elastic. But the absolute value of elasticity is smaller than 1, which means that -0.5 or plus 0.5 or plus 0.3, we can say that that period are inelastic. How about -1 or 1? The absolute value of elasticity is just 1, which we can call it is unitary elastic or just inelastic. Okay. How about plus infinity? It can be happen. We can say that it's perfectly elastic. So from our first graph, we can compare all the 3 graphs, and we saw that there is one, horizontal demand curve. Horizontal demand curve is called perfectly elastic demand curve because, we can say that the third graph here, the D3, since there is small changes in the supply curve, there is a huge change in the equilibrium quantity because the demand curve is really flat, right? As demand curve is going flatter, then that demand curve is more elastic. So if the demand curve is just flat, perfectly flat, which means it is horizontal, then we can say that it is the perfectly elastic curves. Interpretation. People are willing to buy as much as from sell at any price less than or equal to P star, or randomly selected specific price level. If the price increases even slightly above P star, demand falls to 0, which means that their demand is super sensitive. So even small changes price level, their quantity is sensitive. Quantity changes to response to that small changes price level is huge. So we can say this. So it is really elastic or the perfectly elastic. If demand curve is vertical, then there is almost no change in quantity demand changes. Even if there is huge change in price level, there is small changes or really just a little changes in the quantity demand changes in response to that huge change in price level. We can say that it is really inelastic because they are really not sensitive to the change of price level. Even if there is no change in quantity demanded, then we can say that it is perfectly inelastic, right? So the graph A is perfectly elastic demand curve. Number B is perfectly inelastic demand curve. And number 3 is really weird, the kinked version of the demand curve. Then we can say that at some specific point, this demand will be changed from perfectly elastic to perfectly inelastic. So very extreme, weird case of demand curves. So good example, insulin. So demand for insulin. Let's think about the insulin. It is the medical medicine, but above the certain level, you don't have to get the more insulin because that's above the certain level, you're already dead, right? So you don't need insulin anymore. But before that, since you have very high level of pain, you need insulin for sure. Even if the price level is going infinity, then you still want it. But after you're dead, you don't have to get any insulin anymore, even if the price level of insulin is zero. So the third graph is just interpretation like that. So the demand elasticity is really related to the revenue of the firm. It is interesting. Let's look at the graph first. Okay, what is the definition of revenue? Definition of revenue is the price of that good times the quantity you sell. So the price is here is the vertical line and the quantity you sell is the horizontal line. So simply the revenue of a firm is the area of rectangular. So the quantity sold will totally determined by the shape of demand curves. So the area of this rectangular is calculated by the price on the vertical line and the quantity on the horizontal line. So let's look at first E1. If the equivalent quantity is determined by at the E1, then what is your revenue? Revenue is calculated by the area of rectangular P1 times Q1. So A plus B is the revenue at E1. How about E2? If the equilibrium point is changed from E1 to E2, then price level is go up from P1 to P2, and the quantity of equilibrium is decreased from Q1 to Q2. So the rectangular of the area rectangular is A plus C. Okay, so this is revenue. So we can guess that your demand curve is really important in determining your revenue. Okay, if it is really inelastic, your demand is really elastic, which means that your demand is really not sensitive to the change of price level. So the prices increase from P1 to P2, but your demand is not changed because you are not sensitive anymore. So your revenue is increased by C, which means that if your market, your consumer is really inelastic, then you can have more leverage to increase your price level to maximize your revenue. But if your demand, your consumer's demand is relatively elastic, like the second graph, the B, if you increase your price level from P1 to P2, then you're gonna get more revenue by C, but you're gonna lose the revenue by B. So it looks like B is rather than C. So you're gonna lose your revenue. So if your consumer is really elastic, then increasing price level is really risky. You're gonna avoid that strategy. So your revenue changes are really related to the demand sensitivity or the price elasticity of demand. Demand elasticities are changing over time because of several reasons. You can just read those kinds of things and you can make sure that these kinds of factors can make the demand elasticity change over time, okay, by yourself. Okay, so this is the first part of this chapter. So we're gonna stop here because the video is now almost 30 minutes. And I don't want to make the more than 30 minutes video because your concentration rate is now getting, losing something. So let's look at the remaining part in the other video. Okay, thank you so much guys for watching this video. Bye, and be safe from your Corona-19.